Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Bob Mendelsohn, and this is the Bob's Your Uncle podcast. Thanks for joining me for this Season 3, Episode 9 of the Bob's Your Uncle podcast. Of note, the music is Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto in E minor, and the opinions are strictly my own and those of my guests. You can now find us and comment to us wherever you get your podcasts. Tell us what matters to you, what triggers your joy, what bothers you in the world. Let us know. We'll see where the Spirit leads us. Whether you're at home, online, on the road with me in your headset at the gym, or out for your evening constitutional, wherever you get your podcast, that's where we will be. Thanks for being with us these 18 minutes.
But I do know that I love you, and I know that if you love me too, what a wonderful world this would be.
Historical Marker of the Week. On this date in history, 7 February, in 1812, one of the largest earthquakes in United States history occurred along the New Madrid seismic zone, a region of poorly understood, deep-seated faults in Earth's crust that zigzags southwest to northeast through Arkansas, Missouri, Tennessee, and Kentucky. 45 miles wide, 125 miles long. And in 1238, Mongolian forces led by General Batu capture and burn the important Russian city of Vladimir after an 8-day siege. And those are the historical markers of the week. Dear friends, in front of me right now, I have an empty slate. I have a big sheet of paper, and it's got one word on it. It says prayer. Before I carry on, let me read you some quotes. This one from C.S. Lewis. He said this: I pray because I can't help myself. I pray because I'm helpless. I pray because the need flows out of me all the time, waking and sleeping. It doesn't change God. It changes me. William James said the reason why we pray is simply that we cannot help praying. And I remember this book from the 80s, I forget, maybe it was 90s. Yeah, early 90s, called Letters from a Skeptic. And it was a pair of ex-Catholics, Greg Boyd and Ed Boyd, father and son, who were writing letters back and forth to each other. One is now a Baptist, I think, minister and teacher at a Bible college. The other, an unconvinced agnostic/atheist. And the son, Greg, is responding to letters and questions and comments. It's a beautiful series of letters back and forth. In one chapter, it says Correspondence 11, back in 1989, the father, Edward, writes to the son and says, I trust you're all getting into the holiday spirit. This is December. With 3 kids in the house, it's hard not to. I recall those Christmas mornings when you guys were all young. Those are some very fond memories. There's nothing quite like it. You don't know how much I wish I could be up there with you guys during this time of year. I'm dreaming of a white Christmas down here in 80-degree Florida. Tell the little ones their presents are on the way. The father writes and thanks him for the last series of correspondence. He says, in any case, I like your view, Greg, but I simply can't share your faith in it. I just have too many questions. Not to get too academic again, but if you'd like, I'd like to kick around the issue of prayer some more. As I said before, I don't see that prayer ever works. Not only this, but I don't see how prayer ever could work. If God is all good and all powerful and concerned about us, doesn't he already want the best for us? And so wouldn't he already be doing as much as he can ever do for us? So what are you asking for in prayer? For him to care more? He supposedly already cares as much as he could. Are you asking him to do more? He's supposedly already doing everything he can. Are you informing him of some problem so he'll do something about it? He supposedly already knows everything. So you can't inform him about anything, you can't coax him to do anything, and you can't empower him to do anything. So what the hell are you doing when you pray? The whole thing seems like a total waste of time to me. And then he ends with, loving and wishing you a Merry Christmas. I just think, I love the spirit of these father and son. And the son writes back, Greg Boyd writes back to the father, and has some normal beginnings. And then he says, now on to your question about prayer. The main purpose of talking to God, that's all prayer really is, has little to do with asking for things. It's to build a faith-filled, loving relationship with our Creator and Redeemer. What kind of relationship would I have with Shelley, that's his wife, if the only time we ever talked was to make requests of each other? Not much of one, I suspect, and so it is with God. The main function of prayer is simply to be with someone you love, to talk, to listen, or to simply commune with your Creator. I wonder if you've thought of prayer in that way. I know that there is something about it that really speaks to me. I was reading a book, I know this was from a long time ago, by Marjorie Foyle, called Overcoming Missionary Stress. Do you think I'm projecting? Yeah, it was a 1980s book for sure. And she writes a lot about how we're supposed to overcome. And in a section on missionary resources, she writes, another resource is God's restoring power. Understanding this has become even more important due to the current fears about burnout. Some people seem to have got the idea that responding to a call to missionary service implies inevitable burnout, and are understandably reluctant to put themselves on such a disaster course. If it were true, she writes, I would be equally reluctant. I believe God has something reassuring to say about burnout that may solve the problem. The term, burnout, originated in rocket technology applied to booster rockets that expend a vast amount of energy, fall away, burn out, and become useless bits of rubbish. God does not waste people like that. Their bodies are the temples of the Holy Spirit. How can he be housed in a useless bit of rubbish? Yeah, I really like that. She doesn't believe in the useless bits of rubbish concept. So she found the term brownout more helpful to explain what happens when we get exhausted. Brownout means that electrical voltage has fallen and is working less efficiently. Yeah, she writes a lot about relationship with God and with the rest of the people in the community that will be very useful. And then probably the best book on prayer that has been written in the last 20 years, with apologies to all those that are your favorite, is Philip Yancey. The title of the book is Prayer. Does it make any difference? And I'm holding it in my hand, and it was first published in 2006. I really like Yancey on so many levels. His quotes are great. His conversation is great. He's really processing things. And I suppose that is, for me, the most tangible reality. Let me just tell you some of the topics that he unpacks in this book. He talks about our deepest longing. Really, it's all about keeping company with God. And then unraveling the mysteries, why we actually prayed. What difference does it make? Does prayer change God? And then that verse that Yeshua used from Matthew 7, which I'll cite later on. The language of prayer, how are we supposed to talk to him when our gut tells us one thing, our mind's telling us something, and reality and circumstances are in front of us? The dilemmas of prayer and how to practice it. The very, very good thoughts, important thoughts. You've got to process this, or else prayer just becomes a religious function. And it's something that you say before a meal or not, and you wish you had. I remember this couple that lived next door to me some years ago, and they invited me over for a meal, and they knew I was a believer. They said, as the meal was placed on the table, they were atheists, by the way, serious atheists. And they said, should we let him pray? He wants to pray. You know he wants to pray. Well, I don't know. And they back and forth. I'm sitting there watching this like a tennis match, and back and forth and back and forth. Finally, after about 4 or 5 minutes, one of them says, okay, you can go ahead and pray if you have to. And I said, well, I think you've already prayed. What? They said. I said, yeah, prayer is acknowledging God as sovereign in that moment, in that situation. And I think you've already done that. And so I appreciate that. I appreciate you, and I appreciate him for letting me be with you in this time. Prayer is acknowledging that God is and you're not. That may be the best way to ponder it and conclude it and deal with and process it. It's getting into relationship with him. It's getting to speak with him. It's hanging with him. I don't know if you're watching the TV or YouTube, or you went to the theater last weekend and saw The Chosen, grand final or finale of season 3. But that's one of those takeaways that a lot of people are getting from the business of watching Yeshua walk around with Simon Peter and John and James the Lesser and the women who were part of the entourage, all this community that was there. They loved each other. Well, they learned to love each other, but they really enjoyed being with Yeshua. They never quite knew when he was going to be there, when he was going to be away, but it was presence. It was being with him. And you might remember the book, wow, it's so old, The Practice of the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence, who was a monk. And I remember that book like yesterday, and how he really found in his daily life, in his activities, in his normalcy, that he could practice being with God. And for him, that was prayer. Prayer is being with the one to whom you are offering praise or inviting comment, inviting his opinion, inviting his activity. Sure, sometimes you ask for things. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. My grandson was over here just a few minutes ago as I was recording this. And boy, it stopped my recording, and I stopped everything because there he was. He's one of 6 grandsons that I have. I love being with him. And he actually loves being with his Saba. And we have a good time together. And so he invited me to go watch him bounce on the trampoline and to play with him in his tunnel and to throw the ball. All these things are activities, but really it's activities about being present. So when you think about prayer today, with all these thoughts from the Boyds and Philip Yancey, from Marjorie Foyle and from C.S. Lewis, from William James, and from your own understanding, prayer is being with God. No wonder the Apostle Paul said, pray at all times. It doesn't mean say words and ask for things all the time. It means be with him. Every week we read from the bestseller of all time, the Bible, and this week is no exception. This from Matthew chapter 7, the words of Yeshua himself. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be opened to you. What do you think about all this? Write me on bobmendo@aol.com or comment or even video to me on Instagram or Twitter at Bob'sYourUnclePC. I'd love to know what you think about all this. Don't forget to post a review on iTunes or Spotify, wherever you're getting your podcasts. And also, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to follow or subscribe to the podcast and hit like if your app asks for that as well. We can use all the good speak we can get. And your podcast app will notify you of the next episode, which, by the way, will be next Tuesday. Good luck to the Kansas City Chiefs as they battle against the Philadelphia Eagles in Super Bowl 50-something. If you did not hear the interview that I conducted with George Toma, the groundskeeper, head groundskeeper of every Super Bowl ever, make sure you listen to that. It was season 1, episodes 13 and 14, a double episode. George is in his 90s now. He is a cracker. He's a great guy. I love this fella. Lives in Kansas City. You'll definitely want to hear that one. So if you haven't heard it, go back and find that episode. And we'll see you next Tuesday, God willing. Until then, from me, Bob Mendelsohn, when things seem bleak or uncertain, look up to God. He's in his heaven. And Bob's your uncle. Shalom from Sydney.